welcome to our new podcast show entitled Let's Talk 757. Our first episode today will focus on the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision delivered on June 21st, 2021, to unanimously declare that the National Collegiate Athletic Association cannot prohibit certain payments to student athletes under the guise of protecting amateurism. And on June 28, 2021, the NCAA Division I Council proposed that student athletes be permitted to profit from their name, image, and likeness to the NCAA Division I Board of Directors. With that decision, collegiate and high school athletics has changed dramatically and quickly. While new rules and regulations have not been formalized at both the state and federal levels, we can see that significant changes will occur. This clearly is a big deal. So we wanted the reaction and opinions of people in our community. Today, we are very excited to have several members of our Hampton Roads Community Connections Facebook group page as guests to share and discuss their thoughts on the pros, cons, and impact that the new Supreme Court ruling that allows NCAA athletes to make money on their name, image, and likeness. This is our first installment on our commitment to give the community citizens a digital voice. Now, let's meet our distinguished panel. Let's welcome Joseph Wooten. Joseph is a Denby High School class of 1979 graduate. He was the leading scorer on the soccer team. He's a musician. You may have heard of him. He's a keyboardist, vocalist with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted Steve Miller and his Steve Miller Band. He's one of the Wooten brothers, and he's an author. Welcome, Joseph.
How are you?
Let's welcome Ron Warren. Ron is a Hampton High School class of 1967 graduate. He's been involved in various youth baseball and football teams from 1960 to 1964. He was on the varsity golf team at Hampton High School, 64 to 65. He published with Eric Stone, Customer Discrimination in Professional Basketball, Evidence from the Trading Card Market, and Applied Economics, 1999. See his references on page 679 and through 685. He's been on various intramural, softball, and basketball teams at UVA, University of North Carolina, and University of Georgia from 1968 to 2000. He's a professor of economics where he retired in 2017. Welcome, Ron. Let's welcome John McDougal. John is a Kecoughtan High School graduate class of 1975. John played soccer from 71 to 75, even though he was in ninth grade in 71, where you were allowed to play at the high school level, and he was excited about getting out of class early. He's retired from the Department of Defense. He's an avid golfer with an 11 handicap, and he's won several senior flights in local tournaments. John supports organ donors, having recently had a liver transplant. He encourages you all to please sign up to be an organ donor. Welcome, John. Let's welcome Rickey Brown. Rickey Brown is a Hampton High School graduate, class of 1973, and University of Richmond Business School graduate, class of 1977. He is currently a retired IBM and Honeywell marketing and business development professional, and also affiliated with Sports Management Worldwide as a certified agent advisor. Rickey played football for the Hampton Crabbers and D1 football at the University of Richmond from 1973 to 1976. He was a star wide receiver and the team's leading receiver in 1975 and 76. Playing college athletics in many ways shaped his life experiences. Welcome, Rickey. We picked these members because of their candid and passionate responses on our Facebook page. Today, I will serve as your moderator for the discussion. We want the audience to hear what our panel has to say about the decision. Let's present the topic to our distinguished panel. First question for the panel. Share your thoughts in general about athletes being granted the legal right to be compensated by businesses for work done to promote their name, promote products, or their name, image, and likenesses.
I'm a musician, and the way it seems to me, there's so much money made off of athletics at every level, especially at the college level. And as it sits with me as I guess a broad overview of it, it doesn't bother me that athletes are allowed to be that athletes are allowed to make money from their name, image, and likeness, because the college has always made money from their name, image, and likeness. The networks make money off of their name, image, and likeness. The coaches make money off of their name, image, and likeness. It doesn't seem in any way improper for the athlete that's generating that revenue to not be a part of it, to be a part of it. That doesn't bother me at all. I recognize that it creates some challenges, but I think if there's money to be made, it should include the athletes. It should have always included the athletes, as far as I'm concerned, because that's about as American as it gets, making money from the thing that you're good at.
Well, if you go back decades and decades, the NCAA has always been like the bastion of amateur sports, or so they thought they were. Even when schools were making millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, student or athlete wasn't getting any of it for his hard work or for his labor. Labor is a good word there, because if you think it actually is work that they're doing for the school. So I think in the Supreme Court decision, there was a few antitrust violations, as well as compensation violations that they proved that were wrong for a long time. If the athlete is bringing in a certain amount of revenue and not seeing any of it, then the labor laws are violated, in my opinion, and that should put a stop to it with this NIL and let them do their own thing, make their own money, and still be able to represent their school.
Interesting and important to think about how the current rules for name, image, and likeness will evolve. We have some initial guidelines from the NCAA. These will undoubtedly develop further over time. And there are several models that universities might follow to enhance or contribute to the compensation of athletes for their name, image, and likeness. One possibility that exists currently is, especially with the use of trademark names and logos and so forth of universities, is the model where researchers who use university facilities to develop commercially viable patents share the revenue that stems from these patents with the university according to some institution level formula. And one common formula is that the patent revenue is shared equally among the researcher's department, the university, and the researcher, him or herself. So for the student athlete, this model would suggest that using the athlete's name, image, and likeness in concert with the university's trademark and copyrighted logo might imply that any NIL deal is shared in some fashion with the university, the athletic department, and the athlete, him or herself. This is one possibility, and it'll be interesting to see how these guidelines change over time.
Well, I would also agree with all the comments I've heard so far. And one of the biggest concerns I have has been addressed, and that is that the student athletes now have the right to make money, but at the same time, I have a concern that it's just one more burden, one more set of responsibilities thrust upon them. And it'll be interesting to see how they juggle the classroom, running the business, and playing their sport.
Panel members, let's talk about concerns or unintended consequences that might cause harm to all the parties involved as a result of this decision. What are your thoughts?
One of the things that I see is potentially is one of the things that you see that happens in pro sports sometimes, that some athletes are so concerned with their social media, maybe they're not as focused on the game, but that's a real life concern. And as it sits with me, they might as well learn how to do it while they're young, because if they're fortunate enough to go pro, which most of them aren't, it's the world that they're getting ready to go into. But as I see it, it adds another concerning factor, that there's something else for the student to be concerned about than just the pure sport, right? The social media part, or the turning your sport into income. There's lots of ways that could go south, but that's I just all I can keep saying for myself is there's so much money being made. I don't see a problem with the athlete being involved in it. One solution that I could see maybe would be deferring some of that income until after they graduate. That would make sense to me. Give them an incentive to stay in school, make your money, uh, take advantage of your name, image, and likeness. But rather than it being, money at the end of the week, have some of it or majority of it, whatever that number is, deferred until you get your diploma.
Yeah, you certainly don't need millionaire athletes
Right.
running around campus in their fancy cars and showing off, and that could definitely be a detriment. But one of the good things about it is a lot of these athletes that are, come from families that aren't well off.
Right.
They wouldn't have to get part-time jobs. They'd give them more time for their studies, give them more time to practice their whatever sport they're playing, instead of having to work, and try and balance that and school work and athletes, and um, they could concentrate on that, and their grades would probably go up, and the graduation rate would probably go up. If they were compensated, I agree with Bob on the deferred part. That makes a lot of sense. That way they're not running around, like I said, in fancy cars and stuff. And then at the end, they take a financial class, which would be the responsibility of the university or college that they go to. And then they get to leave with a little bit of business acumen and a little bit of nest egg to give them a good start into life. A lot of people don't get that chance. We're not just talking about the stars, the superstars. There's a lot of programs out there already. Rick mentioned one yesterday in Utah about getting everybody involved. There's another guy that runs a MMA gym down in Florida, I think in Miami. I'm not sure. I think it might be in Miami. But anyway, he's giving every single person on that team $500 a month to promote his gym on their social media. And for people that like on the practice squad and stuff, you can make an extra $500 a month. That's a lot of pizza.
Yeah. I think also that it for athletes that are fortunate enough to be able to go pro, it helps them to be good at a thing that young pros aren't very good at, which is managing money. I mean, that happens a lot at the pro level. Here's a person that was just on the block a few months ago, maybe went to college for 1 year, and now they go from not making anything to being a multimillionaire, and they just have no sense of that responsibility. It gives them a chance. It can give them a chance potentially to start taking a look at what that's going to look like, rather than just being thrust in when you're a rookie
I
and
think
you
the
go.
NBA had that problem and they solved it by, you know, a lot of kids, like you said, one and done, you're 18, 19 years old and you get a signing bonus, $50 million. And they didn't know what to do with it. I think the NBA, I'm trying to think, I think they got like a group of the mothers or parents together and gave them the class and told them how to control the money of their student athlete or actually the professional athlete. That's not a bad idea either.
Right.
John earlier mentioned that student athletes are really providing labor. They're really student workers. And we know that the NCAA currently strongly opposes treating student athletes as employees. I think the NIL arrangements are really just the opening chapter of what's going to be a long, possibly drawn out battle over explicit compensation for student athletes, quite apart from tuition, fees, books, and housing. There are some legitimate concerns about treating student athletes as employees. First of all, you have to determine the appropriate level of compensation, and that has to be done across different colleges and universities, across different sports at a given university, and also for individual athletes within a given university and sport. Also, the universities would have to determine an appropriate benefit package, health, life, accident insurance, in concert with the plans existing for other university employees. And also universities would have to decide on the nature of the contract. Will these work contracts be fixed term, like 1 year, 1 season? Will they be at-will contracts between the university and the athlete? These are all things that would have to be worked out if and when athletes are treated for compensation purposes like employees, like student workers are today at many universities. And I think this is going to be part of the conversation going forward.
So panel members, our last and final question. Could the NCAA strike a balance between the sport education for the students and the financial interest of everyone? I mean, what else needs to be considered? You talked a little bit about the financial management education. I'm not sure that that's going really well, but there's always room for improvement. There's also the issue of fairness in recruiting. We already see super conferences versus all other conferences. You got a network, you're the boss. And who controls this mechanism? Is it the boosters or the NCAA? Let's hear your thoughts.
That is going to be.
Let's hope it's not the boosters. Enough damage to college sports. It'd probably be up to the NCAA, I would think. And then every school, they're going to make their own rules. They have like a compliance officer or whatever. And if you've already made a deal to have some type of NIL, you need to go through that compliance office and make sure that everything is fits in the rules of that school as well as the NCAA. Also, I hate to say this, but Congress, I know I've read somewhere that they're trying to get involved, trying to pass some kind of a federal law. So every school in every state would have to go by that federal law until that state developed its own rules, because there's still only like 25 or 26 states that have their own NIL rules and guidelines to go by. Don't really know if we need NCAA or boosters controlling this mechanism.
John makes a good point. I'm wondering what the role of the NCAA is going to be going forward. We're already seeing these super conferences starting to evolve. We may end up with just 2 or 3 big conferences. And at that point, these conferences might be able to strike their own deals, as they do already with broadcasting rights, and they might decide that they don't really need the NCAA as a middleman. So it might be that the conferences are the ones that are going to work out the details among themselves.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that one. That balance, when we talk about balance, that feels like it's going to be a moving target that we're going to see over time. But it's certainly a new factor that they've never had to contend with before. So I'm anxious to see where it goes. I'm just happy that the athlete has finally got included in on the revenue generation.
Yeah, this is a big deal. Yeah, it's right up there with Title IX. You know, when the NCAA had to finally start giving the female athletes and promoting their championships, and it's in its infancy for sure, and it's got a long way to go. And there's going to be a lot of hands and a lot of corporations. There's going to be a lot of people with their hands in it. And so I think if you go ahead and do something at the federal level now, which it's hard to get Congress and to do anything nowadays, but if it was possible to have something there for them to work off of until the states do develop their own guidelines and bylaws, or like Rick said, the super conferences, which are definitely developing. You got Oklahoma and Texas moving into the SEC in 25. Who's to say the rest of them will try to do something like that? And then the NCAA would have very little to do with it.
Any last thoughts on this topic, panel members?
My final comment is a comment that I keep making over and over. I'm just glad that the athlete has finally been included in one of the parties making money off of the thing that they're generating. I think that that's good. But now that it's done, there's work to do to see how it's going to be regulated, and how we're going to go forward in a way that's good for everybody.
Yeah, they're still talking about the student athlete gets paid by paying for their education. That should only be part of it. They're doing a job.
Right.
It's their manual labor. They're putting their life on the line when they go out there on the field. They should be compensated, and they should be compensated well.
Ron, any last parting?
Yeah, I think following up on what John just said, again, one possible model is to treat student athletes for purposes of compensation, apart from tuition fees, books, and housing, like other students who are hired to perform campus jobs, ranging from bussing tables at the cafeteria to assisting with scientific experiments in laboratories. So one possibility might be to pay all full scholarship athletes some type of stipend that would be comparable to what student workers, student assistants who work maybe 20 hours a week on a campus job earn now. For example, at the University of Georgia, that would be about $20,000 per academic year. But of course, that would vary somewhat across colleges and universities. And my idea would be that the stipends themselves would be equal across athletes with a given scholarship level. Obviously, you've got some people on half scholarship, some on full scholarship, some on no scholarship, but differences across athletes in their productivity and in the way in which they generate revenue would be handled primarily through the NIL deals rather than by the compensation levels. But this is all just something that's going to have to be thought about, tinkered with, and will undoubtedly evolve over the next few years. It'll be exciting to watch.
On that, it will be exciting to watch. Let me issue a hearty thank you and warm appreciation to our panel members for your engagement and your thought-provoking responses. You've given us a lot to think about. And thank you to all of those who engaged with us on our Hampton Roads Community Connection Facebook page, you were the inspiration to allow us to present our first episode. And I'd like to take time out to recognize individually each one of those respondents. Quentin Daniels, Bob Carter, Derek Warren, Rickey Brown, Steve Seidel, Anthony Scott, Kirk Hilliard, Ron Warren, Chris Coleman, Rudy Hendricks, Mike Hash, Joseph Wooten, and Derry Green. Rickey Brown will have the last and final word in this episode as he shares some takeaways and a summary of today's topic.
Okay, guys, excellent discussion. And it certainly was my pleasure to participate on the panel. So as we conclude our discussions, we have heard now a variety of opinions from our guests as to what they think the impact of these new rules will have on college athletes and college athletics in general. We talked about some of the fundamental issues concerning the new rules. As a recap, I will point out what I think are the key takeaways. And I would start by first pointing out that name, image, and likeness rights are not just unique to college players. As mentioned earlier, everyone has the right to be compensated for the use of their name, image, and likeness, commonly referred to as a person's right to publicity. As you heard Joe Wooten say, that is about as American as it gets, and making money at what you're good at. And the recent Supreme Court decision on name, image, and likeness clearly confirms that college athletes are not excluded, as it would violate their constitutional rights to work and to be compensated. I also think it's important to point out that the two essential components of the college sports model that consist of amateurism rules and academic eligibility requirements are going to change. Amateurism rules simply means that college athletes cannot receive pay for play. The academic eligibility rules or requirements were designed to maintain the priority of education, to promote fair competition amongst the colleges, and perhaps most important, differentiate college sports from professional sports. So these two components are the pillars, if you will, that prevent college athletes from receiving payment for playing their sport in excess of their scholarship that is supposed to cover all of their educational requirements and expenses. As college sports has progressed along in this manner in the past, with the new rule changes now, we're seeing another change in the college amateurism laws that now allow the athletes to earn compensation. And while these changes are probably a good first step, they still do not address the real issue, which is the NCAA, colleges and universities do not allow the athletes to participate in fair labor compensation in what has become a multi-billion-dollar sports industry that the athletes themselves created. Even with the new rule changes, their compensation still must come from somewhere other than the institutions themselves. And this fact underscores the big issue, which is college athletes are not allowed to receive any of these financial benefits. As John McDougal indicated, and I quote, "The schools are making hundreds of millions of dollars and the athletes are not getting any of it for their hard work and labor." He went on to say, quote, "Labor is a good word there because it actually is their work that's creating the profits." So it is significant to point out that the new rule changes only grant athletes the right to make money by getting a job, actually a second job, if you consider playing their sport and going to school their first job. But what is good about these new rule changes is that they move college sports closer to fixing what I believe is an age-old, and most believe that is an age-old flawed business model that's long overdue to be fixed. Ron Warren's suggestion that one commonly used formula or business model that colleges and universities use to share revenue with researchers who help develop commercially viable patents for the use of their trademarks and logos could also be used to share profits generated from sports revenues with the athletes. So these are the key takeaways and highlights to note from our discussion. We can all be assured that these points are just the tip of the iceberg. And stay tuned because there will be more coming. And if you want to learn more and receive the latest news updates on name, image, and likeness, go to our website at 757sportsconnection.org. And by the way, you can also share your comments on this show and any suggestions for future shows in the live chat box below.
This concludes our first episode of Let's Talk 757.